appreciate all you guys coming on a super beautiful day. I'm going to make you do little miniature practices over the next 20 minutes, and then we're going to open up into a big, giant, rowdy potential Q&A if you want about anything about exploring consciousness, since it's my super favorite subject. So I want to start with, there'll be a few slides, and we'll start with this slide right here. If you haven't seen this map, you've probably seen one map like it at some point or another. It's kind of an artifact from the last great age of exploration. So Eastern Canada and the 13 colonies are pretty well represented, but the rest of the continent is sort of a big blank expanse not yet charted by Western powers. Of course, plenty of indigenous groups knew the territory. I want to suggest that something similar is happening today, that we're on the verge of the next great age of exploration, except the mysterious continent is not out there, but in here. Most of our intellectual authorities have absolutely no idea how deep and how far this continent extends, but some do. Consciousness is a hot subject these days. So one of the things that's new about this age of exploration is that it's democratic. Anyone with a mind can partake. You don't need expedition funding or a royal charter. Any of you can make the trip. So that's what I'm hoping we're going to do today, start to take a little bit of a trip into some of these spaces. So my name is Jeff Warren. Thanks for the introduction, Karina. I'm an explorer. I make a living writing about consciousness and teaching meditation. A few years ago, I founded the Consciousness Explorers Club, which is the meditation adventure group that Karina mentioned. It's in downtown Toronto. And this is our slogan: meditate, celebrate, activate. Because going in gives you new appreciation for going out. It gives you the freedom to dance, to love, to ultimately give back in service, to activate in service. Meditate, celebrate, activate. So in our minds, it's sort of the life arc of a good explorer. In terms personally, I've always been psyched about exploring consciousness, which I always want to laugh when I hear exploring consciousness. It just sounds kind of hilarious. In my teens, it meant that I liked to deliberately hyperventilate and pass out. That was one of my favorite pastimes. I'd practice telekinesis in my bedroom, trying to will a ham sandwich to float up from the kitchen, which I never succeeded. In my 20s, it meant basically that I liked to party, so I'd eat lots of magic mushrooms and MDMA, and I'd go dancing to trance music and pretend to have tantric sex, and did tons of yoga, and I had a really good time. Those were fun times. Eventually, my super nerdy interest in consciousness and in neuroscience led me to write a book about sleeping, waking, and dreaming, and how the different states all interrelate with each other, what their relationship is, what kind of knowledge is available in these different states. But it wasn't until I actually started meditating, until I began a real practice, that I became what I consider a real explorer. And it saved my life. That exploration saved my life. It gave it meaning that I didn't have before. So for the next 17 minutes, I'm going to take you on a trip, journey from the surface of consciousness down to the source. This is sort of like the El Dorado that we're going to. It's the place it's where the real treasure is. It's the place that everybody needs to go, even if they don't realize they need to go there. After our trip, I'll kind of go over some of the benefits of practice, but also some of the dangers, some of the pitfalls that can happen. So we're going to start right here. Not just the here of this room, but the here of this moment, the perpetual here, the here each one of us lives in. Here, 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 the here of being. What is this? I mean this. What is this? We exist. Nobody knows why or how this came to be. We live every moment inside a very profound mystery. Most of the time, we don't think about this. We just get on with the business of living and working and playing. But it's also possible to continue to do all of those things, and as you do them, never lose a kind of primordial contact with, a sense of connection to that mystery. When you do this, things begin to change. Your own existence, which is also everyone else's existence, comes forward to meet you in a very different way. So let's go back to our map, to some of the terrains that a traveler can cover between the surface, the middle, and the ground. We'll start at regular waking consciousness, which is dominated by our five senses, by sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and by what in Indian philosophy and Indian traditions consider another sense, the thinking. We think we know this surface experience because it's so familiar, but have you ever actually really, really, really paid attention, for example, to the sounds inside this room? Try it. Be very still, hold your breath, and listen. Sort of expand your awareness out to the ambient surround. Can you hear the space inside each sound? The pressure of silence on your eardrums that's there even when there's noise, even when there's a background hum. The moment's much richer than most of us realize. In Buddhism, increasing our understanding of direct experience is called the path of insight. And it can be a window onto some of our subconscious processes, among other things. Did you know that you can learn to follow the chains of association in your experience, that you can learn to actually boost the resolution of your perception? Let's try it. Why don't you close your eyes for a minute and turn your attention inward. Try to observe what your thoughts are made of. So as I say the word tree, and I'll say it again, tree, can you notice a flash of a tree image in your mind's eye? Look really closely. Keep saying the word tree to yourself, just silently to yourself, watching that space. Where do you see this tree? Is it above your eyes? Is it off to one side? There are spaces in consciousness. Now bring your attention down and into your body. Feel its fullness, the fullness of your body sitting in those chairs. Move your attention out to the body's edge, to where your skin meets the air. Can you feel the boundary? Is it stable, or is it shifting? Does it vibrate? Is it porous? Did you know that as you go into any sensation, any sound, sight, or feeling, that over time it breaks up into pixels? Everything solid melts into air. Did you know that you could learn to watch the particulate matter of each sensation bloom and disappear? That you can watch the moment create itself? You can open your eyes now. Exploring in this way, we begin to see into the fundamental features of sensory reality itself. This is called the path of insight. It gets stranger. There are middle worlds, most often accessed at night. Maybe my talk's making you sleepy. Good. Let's actually go there right now. Let yourself drift, but keep your eyes open. You already know what it's like to fall asleep. You've done it thousands of times. Thoughts get strange and more associative. There you are thinking about some image, and then suddenly you're inside it. But we can wake up in a dream, just like we can wake up in reality. What is it like? It can be beautiful. The textures, the vividness. When you're inside a lucid dream, the sounds and sights and sensations are every bit as convincing as those in this room. You actually can't believe it's a possibility of life on Earth. Fully sentient immersion in another dimension of reality. The other big nighttime event is slow wave sleep. A kind of oceanic plunge into blissful, dreamless unconscious. Most of us don't remember what happens in deep sleep since our ability to form short-term memories is actually disengaged. But even here, awareness can penetrate. Some explorers, mostly Indian explorers, move through these depths with perfect clarity and discernment. They describe a state of intense bliss. Something people don't realize, you actually don't need to fall asleep to experience some of these spaces, to explore them. There are other doorways. One can be found in the path of concentration. Here we get into something called the absorptions. These are deep states of concentration that have been independently discovered by different contemplative traditions. They're like ancient interconnected rooms in the mind, each progressively more subtle and fulfilling, until we finally arrive at what are called the formless states. So I'll show you one way into these rooms right now. Close your eyes again and focus on the back of your eyelids. So there's a kind of undulating lava lamp of brightness and darkness that we can see behind our eyes. And just deliberately try to notice any light patches that might be there. So it might be just sort of blotchy pixels that you see, but try to focus as best as you can on any lighter tones. It can take a while, but over time the patches of light may coalesce into a white disk, like a full moon hovering over a still pool of water. Nimitta, they call it in Buddhism. If your concentration is strong, this moon can pull you through into a completely different kind of space. You can open your eyes. This is where it gets intensely weird. About halfway into the absorptions, there's actually a bridge. In Buddhism, they call it the fourth jhana, to what an Indian philosopher Sri Aurobindo called the intermediate zone. They call it the weird shit. A territory of visions and powers and shamanic entities, of animal spirits, archetypes, powerful energies. Not every explorer encounters these spaces, but some do. They can be enchanting, but they can also be deluding. Meikyo, they say in Zen, means cave of ghosts. One of the perils of the intermediate zone is you never really know what's true and what's a figment of your imagination. There's lots of New Age people wandering around in here, channeling Ramtha and taking everything they experience way too literally. It's very easy to get lost in this country. But if you continue to go deeper, you can begin to orient to the source of all experience, one that illuminates the whole territory. So what is the source? If we knew the answer to that, there'd be no mystery. Whatever else it may be, it's definitely a feature of consciousness. Different traditions have different names for it. Purusha in Hinduism, original mind in some schools of Buddhism, God, the Tao. The source is your deepest identity. It's who you really are. Here's a paradox. You can spend years traveling, journeying to the source through progressively more rarefied experiences until you come to pure consciousness, the empty ground, the zero. That's from the Zen Oxfording pictures. Or you can learn to recognize that the source is already all around us. It's what all experience, all mind stuff is made of. This is source not as destination, but as a kind of infusion. So I want you to try something for me. Bring your attention right now, not to the content of your existence, but to the fact of it. Try this, even if you're not sure what the hell I'm talking about. What does it feel like to exist? What does it feel like? Can you notice how just holding your attention in this way introduces a very subtle lightness and spaciousness into your experience? This tiny shift in perspective is very important. Everything in your life is changing except for one thing, the fact that you exist in the first place. When you allow your attention to settle on the slightly giddy sensation of your own being in this moment, and try it again, you exist. You begin to make contact with a perspective that's immune to the slings and arrows of fortune. Over time, the more you come back here, and here, and here, the more stable this perspective becomes. Suffering decreases, fulfillment increases. You discover you belong here. You belong here. You come home. In Zen, they say you return to the marketplace. A little bit more jolly, a little lighter, not taking yourself quite so seriously, ready to help others in an unpretentious, just because kind of way. There's a lot more I could say about this piece, about the service piece, the activate piece. A lot of it was said yesterday by my good friend and fellow explorer, James Miscallick, in his talk, How to Help Others Without Hurting Yourself. But for the last part of this talk, I want to mention a few principles of healthy exploration from someone who's been definitely lost a few times, but finally found his way. So this is the way of the consciousness explorer. So the different principles. Principle 1, just start wherever you are. That's principle 1. Principle 2, don't get too hung up on maps. So different traditions and teachers organize the territory in very different ways. You want to make sure you don't get too fixated on one map or on comparing your experience to another person's. Your experience is definitely not going to look like Eckhart Tolle's. There's no one right experience, there's no one right map. In the end, there's only your experience and your map, which you make by walking. So there's a verse by a Spanish poet I really like, Antonio Machado. Wander, there is no road. The road is made by walking. So that said, there are universal themes and terrains and challenges, which is why it's important to, this is our number 3, find a guide in a community. A big part of exploring is getting lost. The Buddhist teacher Jack Kornfield said that one of the most basic principles of spiritual life is that we learn the deepest things in unknown territory, in the very place where we feel furthest from our natural competencies. At these times, we need someone outside of ourselves to help orient us, to help get us back on track. It's a guide, a community of fellow explorers, people to give us feedback. So what to look for in a guide? Integrity, sense of humor, kindness, but mostly lots of experience. Look to a guide's oldest students. Are they generally happy? Are they healthy? They seem well adjusted? Do they have qualities you yourself aspire to? Okay, principle 4, know the risks. So a period of difficulty is a natural part of every exploration. It's actually a natural part of all growth. Spiritual growth, in the way I think of it, it happens in 2 directions. It happens out and it happens down. It happens on 2 axes, like a horizontal and a vertical axis. You grow out in terms of your sensitivity and your discernment. You see more, you feel more, but you grow down in terms of your capacity to stand firm in that discernment, in that awareness. So the growing out part, here's the thing, it's not always pleasant. You see things you'd rather not see. Patterns of resistance, fears, your various completely lame, unsavory qualities that you've been trying to hide from everybody, they're right there. All the ways in which you've been acting unconsciously. Basically, you're not allowed to act like a robot anymore. You've seen through, You also see with like a whole ton of new poignancy the suffering all around you, the heartbreak of being human, the way people treat each other and the planet, the way they hurt. These kinds of insights can be very destabilizing. Basically, it's like you grow out faster than you've grown down, and this actually happened to me. I had a very difficult few years where practice made me so raw, I felt like I could hardly hang out in the world. I had to just be in nature all the time. Eventually, though, the downward growth catches up, and your new sensitivities get integrated. So you develop the resilience to stand in the middle of life with this quality of presence, with the quality of dignity. And that's why meditation is described as a warrior's path, for the bravery it takes to keep your mind open and your helping hand steady. You basically learn to be with how things actually are as opposed to how you might want them to be. Which brings me to my next point. Know why you're exploring. Ultimately, exploration is not about cool experiences, even though it's fun to have cool experiences. And I actually get down on guys that aren't into the recognize how fun and juicy this stuff is. But ultimately, it is about becoming more sane, more compassionate, more awake. This is your litmus test. If your explorations or your chosen guide is not helping you grow in that direction, then you need to think hard about what it is that you're doing. So, is there a key to exploring, like some core principles to keep in mind that I think everyone could value from, or I think there are. The first is, this is my favorite word, by the way. If you ever take a meditation class with me, all I do is talk about equanimity. It's my huge theme for me. And by this I mean an easygoing acceptance and poise. Equanimity is not trying to endlessly bargain and negotiate with reality. It's not trying to push and pull on your experience. It's a kind of a dignity and a composure. And it's also the secret sauce, basically, of all explorations. It's a kind of maturity and humility. And it just so happens, it's not a coincidence that really big discoveries in an exploration, in a practice, are often preceded by a moment of surrender. So it's like the more you let go and trust, the more life itself is actually free to kind of pick you up and lift you down exactly where you need to be. It's in the act of surrender that you actually open yourself to resources that are actually obscured by your striving, which is one of those paradoxes of meditation that if you've ever done much meditation, you may recognize. So another quality, these ones are obvious and super fun. Basically, equanimity, openness, they create the ground. They create a perfect empty medium. That's what you're doing in meditation. You're creating a perfect empty medium, and then what do you want to lay down inside that medium? Obviously, you want to lay down love, like you want to lay down something really fun, something juicy. And so that's what this part is, and this is like, actually, I'll give you guys a little practice right now. So the practice is, as you breathe in, so breathe in, kind of say to yourself, thank you. So you breathe in, thank you. As you breathe out, say, I love you. I love you. So breathe in, thank you. Breathe out, I love you. So you're breathing in the world's beauty, the mountain air. Thank you, mountain air. Thank you, my friends. Thank you, random smiling stranger. Thank you, anything. You're breathing in your appreciation. So instead of seeing a tree that looks beautiful or a view that looks beautiful, you actually take a moment to say, thank you for that beautiful thing. You breathe in, and it like kindles your heart. It creates a little warmth in the heart, that appreciation. And then you breathe out your affection. Thank you. You breathe out your affection, your care. It's like breathing in, kindling the heart. Now you've got some energy in there that you can work with to send back out. You breathe out in the form of of kind action, of some kind of giving back. That's the secret sauce right there. Breathing in, breathing out. And that way you sort of suffuse all your explorations with a kind of positive energy and a friendliness. So I have one last point, and I'm going to open it up for Q&A. It may seem like a slightly tangential point, but it's really important because one of my interests is in trying to bring the benefits of practice, of exploration to audience that are often that don't know they need it. In other words, the sort of secular mainstream. So my point is, if you're going to talk about your experience, about your exploring, then you want to emphasize the actual experience over the interpretation. So, because this is something really interesting. At a certain point in your exploration, this really curious things happen. This curious thing can happen, and that's that you lose your neutrality. You start to experience firsthand how these practices can change you, can make you happier, can make you healthier. But then, without ever having set out to, you become a kind of activist for a technique, for a path. Your language shifts from descriptive to prescriptive. And this is where you have to be careful, because this is where you'll lose people. Basically, people who could really benefit from a practice are suddenly put off of what seems like religious zeal on your part. And actually, even in a meditation, if you've ever done a meditation retreat, there's a period of exuberance in a retreat where you're you get everything, you get tons of insight, you're super psyched. You're like, meditation's awesome. And you just want to call people at 4 a.m. all night long, just call them up and tell them how great meditation is. They're like, cult, this person's in a cult. So my whole thing is look, if someone asks, describe as honestly and matter-of-factly as you can your own experience. If it helped you, you can talk about that. If it hurt you, you can talk about that. That's the kind of account people can make a good decision based on an account like that. As soon as you start making kind of grand pronouncements about the nature of reality, you go from being an explorer to a salesman, and it's tiring to travel with a salesman. I know it's ironic that I just said that because sometimes I wonder if maybe I've become too much of a salesman. I actually don't know if I have. I try to keep my explorer neutrality and my journalistic neutrality, but I won't lie about the wonders that I've seen, about how the journey's changed me. Why do we explore? So T.S. Eliot had a great verse. He wrote it 70 years ago as part of his 4 quartets. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. This place, this mystery. Like it or not, if you're conscious, you're already an explorer, a member of the world's biggest club. Welcome to the adventure. That's my talk.